Hello and welcome to another episode of But Why, the podcast that's all about digging into big questions and tricky topics via honest conversations. This week we're going to be looking at grief and, of course, as part of that, death. And I am joined by Stacey Heale. Stacey is a writer, speaker, curator and mother who discusses grief, loss and how to really live. She left her previous career as a fashion academic to care for her husband, musician and artist, Greg Gilbert, when he was diagnosed with incurable She left her previous career as a fashion academic to care for her husband, musician and artist, Greg Gilbert, when he was diagnosed with incurable bowel cancer. Greg died in late 2021 after 5 years of living with the disease. So let's get cracking with the episode. Stacey, I always like to start with 3 questions. Ease us in and then we'll really go for it. How are you really? What star sign are you? And what's your favourite crisp?
These are excellent questions. Start with the most important. I'm a Pisces, which I do believe you are as well. Don't you find that you can spot your own?
Yeah, and I end up with so many Pisces on this podcast. Oh yeah.
It's a weird dynamic, isn't it? That you can be in a group of people, and if you were to really think about it, you could totally clock the Pisceans.
Yeah, I mean, do you own your Pisceanness, or do you?
Absolutely, yes. I am like the archetype, the dreamy, flighty, artistic type.
Are you?
Are you? Do you think you're a real Piscean?
Yes, I am, but it depends how much you're into this, but my moon is Aries, so it means I've got this really quite fiery, driven part of me, which, to be honest, is actually terrible because the Piscean part, the Pisces in me absolutely loathes that section. So I quite often do stuff which is quite hot-headed and then lose myself in beat myself up for that.
I don't know what my moon is. I think that's interesting because I'm not just this ethereal creature just floating around the world. I'm really stubborn. I'm really strong-willed, very flighty, gets bored easily as well. So maybe, I'm going to find out.
Yeah, it's quite important. It's not important, but I mean, if you're into
this. But it is.
I've got an episode of this series with Francesca Oddi, who's an astrologist. I'm going to do a full out-and-out star sign one, and I can get all of this stuff out in the open.
Do it.
And I'd probably lose a load of people who don't care about this, but anyhow.
Who cares? Favourite crisp? I tell you what, at the moment, it is cheap. The cheaper the better, onion rings.
Wow. So you're not wanting to be in close contact with any kind of other human being?
Not interested when they're involved. I can do the whole big share packet of those. And the other question, how am I really? If you'd have asked me yesterday, I'd have said, are you allowed to swear on this?
Yeah.
I'd have said fucking shit. Like on my knees shit.
Broken.
Yeah, just really found things really hard yesterday. Today, do you know what? I've woken up in a totally different mood. It's so weird. Grief is a funny beast. Works in mysterious ways. So currently, I'm all right. Not too bad.
And you know what? What I want to say to you is you've got to really own that today feels like a better day, you know, because it's so easy to, I imagine, live in fear of when that crash comes again, which is kind of inevitable. But today, right now, you feel okay.
I'm very much a fan of grabbing the good moments.
Yeah.
When you've had such an unbalanced waiting towards the shit, I think when the good comes, you just you want to revel in it and just bask in the light of it.
Yeah, that's good that you're allowing yourself to do that. So for listeners, Stacey and I have met before. I hosted a dinner about 5 years ago, just over, for Stand Up to Cancer, and Stacey wrote an amazing list about the experience of being a carer. And then as Greg was dying, she wrote another list, which is probably one of the most remarkable bits of writing I've ever come across.
Oh, goodness, Clemmie, thank you.
Well, it is. It's yeah. I mean, it stops you in your tracks, because it's one of those things where you're writing in a moment when we are stripped down to our most human. It's almost like you writing a list when you're in labour. You know, there are very few moments where you nothing else matters, and you can just really see life for what it is. So unusually, I've asked Stacey to read that list on here, because otherwise I'm going to be trying to refer to it, and the only way you can understand what it's like is to hear it. So that's my intro to you.
Thank you. I have known for 5 years that Greg would die of stage 4 bowel cancer. I've read every book, I've had all the therapy, and nothing has prepared me for this moment. I feel shocked to the core. I'm so angry that as a society, we don't talk about death and grief, and it fucks us up. I'm thinking about the details of my NCT classes, about birth, about changing nappies, about breastfeeding, and yet I knew nothing about the process of dying. Death is so abstract. It reminds me of eating meat. You know it's an animal, and yet you can't really get your head around that you're eating a living being's flesh. The brain seems to abstract certain concepts in order for us to be able to put one foot. I'll read that again. The brain seems to abstract certain concepts in order for us to put one foot in front of the other and be able to eat a burger. I was not expecting the emotional disengagement between us. I imagined Greg to be himself until the moment of his last breath. I now know that this isn't what happens. I thought I would be camped bedside, holding hands until the end, but for the past 7 weeks since Greg went into end-of-life care, I've spent around 10 minutes a day with him. He finds visitors overwhelming and too much. Dying is a process. You're not just alive, feeling very poorly, and then you suddenly slide off into the universe. In our case, it's been long-winded, with good days that follow bad days. My friend Anna Lyons told me that people are in life are... let me say that again. My friend Anna Lyons told me that who people are in life, they will be in death, and this could not be truer. I can't get my head round where Greg will go. If I was religious, this would be so much easier. I feel like an alien in amongst humans. I know this awful secret that we're all going to have to watch someone we love die close up. And now I have to go about the daily human business of going to Sainsbury's with this existential knowledge. I'm so glad that we wrote our wills a few months ago. I'm thinking of all those women sat beside their dying husbands worrying about finances. We had critical health insurance and it has saved us. Oh, did you want me to read like the bit about the insurers wanting Greg to do the AIDS test? Is that should I do
it all?
Should I do it all bit? Okay. I'll do that from the start. Hang on. We had critical health insurance and it has saved us. From when Greg was in a band and insurers believed that you are more likely to contract AIDS if you are a musician. True story. The thought of having to work or lose your house in the worst moment of your life is sickening. The beginning of the end came from nowhere and is now like a toboggan hurtling down a mountain. I want to be around so few people at the moment, only people who are as close to Greg as I am. I crave being alone. There is so little space and time to process anything that's happening. This is a liminal space, like a dreamlike waiting room. I recognise everything around me, and yet nothing is the same. I feel like we are all moving underwater. There is so much silence and waiting around. There is lots of small talk about nonsense. Making dark jokes have kept our inner sanctum sane. Greg and his brother Aaron thought about pranking their parents by putting a white sheet over Greg's body and announcing he had died. I forgot about that. This is the perfect insight into their family's humour, and it is so welcome now. I'm finding my feet talking to the girls about Greg dying. My policy is I will tell them everything I know, but they ask me questions that floor me, like, how can we let our dog know that Daddy will die? And will Dad ever have a haircut again? Sitting with them in their grief while I try to process mine is the hardest thing I've ever done. Holding the space to meet them where they're at, rather than where I would like them to be, feels mostly impossible. I'm scared of the future, in particular the girls' teenage years. I don't know how I will navigate it on my own. I was a sassy, difficult teenager, and even at 5 and 7, Darlie and Bay are mini versions of me. The physical feelings of grief are often overwhelming. It feels like morning sickness, being drunk, and a hangover all at once. I feel like I've had a lobotomy. As quickly as thoughts come, I can feel them leaving my head, lost into the ether. Who do I phone first to say that Greg has died? Who gets an actual call and who will get a WhatsApp message? The thought of phoning people and having their grief mirrored back to me is too much. I thought that I would be with Greg when he actually died, but now I'm not sure at all. I think that he doesn't want anyone with him. All the nurses tell me that people die when loved ones go to make a cup of tea, and I can absolutely see that happening. I keep thinking that this is almost over, as if there was some kind of salvation on the horizon. I think that might be when the real work starts. Other people I love are going to get cancer and die, and at the moment, I have no idea how I will find the strength to do this again. I feel like a child and an old woman all at the same time. I'm starting to feel reckless, like everything and nothing matters all at once. I wonder how that will manifest after Greg dies. I'm thinking about what I will wear to the funeral, how I will buy something fabulous and keep the labels on to take back afterwards because I know that I will never be able to wear it again. I want to look like a full-on Italian mobster widow. If I have to be a widow at 41, I may as well be a fucking fabulous one. I'm wondering if my waterproof eyeliner is all it's cracked up to be and if I should risk it at the funeral. I hope there aren't people at the funeral who didn't really know Greg that rock up and sit near the front while close friends have to stand outside. How do you police that? That actually happened, and I knew it was going to happen, and it did.
People are mad, aren't they?
Well, I was informed that by the funeral director, they were like, look, you don't need to worry about this. There is definite funeral etiquette. People will know. And when I was at the front talking, doing my eulogy, I kind of looked up a few times and there were people I was like, for fuck's sake, how the fuck did you get in here? Because you could only have so many people inside. There was all these people. There probably was about 600 people outside.
Wow.
Like all of my best friends were outside. They couldn't get a seat. And there were fans of the band that I saw sat inside. And I was like, fuck you. Sorry.
No.
Sorry, I'd totally forgotten about that. That just reminded me of it. How do you sum someone up in 3 songs at a funeral? There is so much left unsaid. So much. You think 5 years of knowing your days are numbered would mean that you say all of the things, and you don't. Relationship dynamics get in the way. There is so much that I would like Greg to know about how he has hurt me over the years that I've had to keep to myself because cancer trumps everything. And that time has gone. I've been silently angry with Greg over the last few weeks. I didn't think you could have so much anger at someone who is dying. It feels very inappropriate. And there is so much that I would like Greg to know about how much I love him, all the ways that having him as my person has shaped me. I listen and dance to his music in the kitchen when the girls are at school, and I can feel who he was when he wasn't ill, and it makes me feel young and hopeful again. Listening to This Woman's Work by Kate Bush before going to sit by the bedside of your dying husband is a rookie error. Why the fuck did I do that? I forgot that. The joy of just sitting in silence for 5 minutes watching him breathe is like a religious experience. I want to smash the universe to pieces to bring him back from the precipice of death, just to have one more conversation with him. Something trivial, anything, just to hear his normal voice say my name. I can't bear Greg's belongings in our bedroom, his half-read books by the side of the bed, half-eaten packets of favourite biscuits. I want to throw it all out and paint the walls. I can't bear the thought of anything changing in our bedroom, though. It will be as if I'm getting rid of us, and I'm homesick for another time. I hope people don't send me lots of flowers. I'm really allergic. I desperately want to go on holiday. I want it to be over, but I never want it to end.
Wow.
Wow, I purposefully didn't read that before speaking to you because
Mm,
I wanted it to hit. Because I wrote that 5 months ago now.
mm,
Um, and I forgot so much of that. So much of that I'd forgotten. Um, and you're really right about saying about like writing something in labor, that
mm,
moment where reality has shifted.
mm,
You are you, but you're also not you, and you're in this transient space that I think you do experience in labor, where you are so confronted by life and birth
mm.
and this incredible moment. And really it really is the same the other end.
Yeah, it is.
It's the same space that you enter. um and I say about this liminal space where
Mm,
everything you're looking around and you're seeing your people, you're looking at your own home, but it's like a dream because ev- you are living in another world at the same time.
mm.
It's a very bizarre thing.
Yeah, you have in both times, you have, this outer body thing where it's like, "This is changing." I know that it's changing. I can kind of physically feel that I am changing, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it, and it's you've got to move forward in both cases, and yeah, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Such a powerful bit of writing. Thank you so much for, like, putting that into the public domain because
Oh well,
it's the
thank
most
you.
intimate.
I felt it was really important for me to write about that space because I think one of the key things that I write about is about how angry I was at that
Mm,
time, which seems like a strange emotion in such a space, but it was because was thinking, no one talks about this.
mm,
No one has ever explained to me what dying looks like, and that's someone who's been immersed in cancer world for half a decade with somebody who we all knew was going to die. And I'm the perennial student. I had read all of the books, listened to all the podcasts, I'd done all of that. I was even working with Anna Lyons from Life, Death, Whatever.
it's amazing.
She was my end of life doula. She had a doula for end of life. So it is like birth. It
Mm,
is birth. And even working with her and like really wanting to get into kind of the nuts and bolts of what this was going to look like for me to prepare myself, nothing prepared me. Again, like birth, really, nothing prepares
mm,
you for a human coming out of your body. And the emotions and the chemicals and the endorphins.
mm,
And it's the same. And I felt so angry that we've got such a setup. There's infrastructure with birth and there isn't with death.
mm,
And I felt that I'd done all the things to kind of really help me. And I was just shocked all the way through the really active part of Greg dying, which was 2 months long. Just shocked by the things that I felt, that I saw, the things that I didn't know. And we had nurses with us that were coming in 3 times a day.
mm,
So I was constantly going, what does this mean? What does this mean? What are we thinking? What, like trying to analyze everything.
mm,
And I mean, again, like labor, people can't say, oh, you're going to give birth
mm.
in 5 hours. No one can tell you when someone's going to die, even if they're literally about to die. But yeah, I just felt so much anger that these things aren't talked about. And it just leaves us, even the more um, the people like me who thoroughly researched it, just really lost.
Do you and I couldn't agree more, it's part of why I go about this work, and as you know, I've spoken to Anna at length, and she is remarkable, but then I'm wondering, is that because you can't know? Because, like, there is definitely things you need to understand about the process of dying, for sure, but in some ways, can you ever intellectualize or prepare for something? Is this one of those human experiences where, unfortunately, you just have to live through it, or do you think that's not the case?
I think there are certainly physical things that people just in biology, I think, like being taught to people should know about the dying process, about what happens to the body, what happens to people mentally. I mean, imagine in labour if someone didn't say to you in NCT classes or just in your midwife sessions, you have a placenta that you are going to give birth to afterwards. If you're having um, a a natural birth, you'll get, imagine not being told that and the
It's
terror
a
of
shock.
going, oh
What's this?
Jesus Christ, I'm giving birth to an organ. Or if no one told you what water's breaking was,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly you're surrounded in liquid. Imagine not knowing that.
It's true.
And it's just this kind of very basic thing about how the body will die. And again, of course, again, to go back to labour, it's so different for everybody. You can't say this is how it's going to work, this is how this is going to look for you. There are similarities, but everything's different. But there's some core things that I really wish that I had known and that I didn't learn in the moment.
For example?
um, there's physical things about how skin looks, how when the order that the organ shut down, and how when people when their liver function stops, they get jaundice and they turn yellow. And again, like, I didn't really know this, so I then needed, my children were saying, why is daddy yellow? And I'm having to play catch up and like having to try to explain that to a child. I also really wish that I had known a lot about what happens emotionally when someone dies. I think for me and the inner sanctum of our families, one of the hardest things was that Greg retreated from us, and we were not expecting that.
Yeah, that's really hard. And
And
you're getting, yeah,
we,
you understand it.
yeah,
You understand what
absolutely.
he's going through.
It's and actually, we talk about animals, about when an animal is going to die, they retreat, they find a dark corner under a bush to die alone. That's what animals do. And actually, it's nothing like the things that we see in films, in TV, that heartfelt moment. And I thought, I'm going to get it. I'm going to be sat, we're going to be holding hands, we're going to be looking in each other's eyes, and I'm going to get to tell you everything I've ever thought of you, and you're going to tell me these beautiful things, and I'm going to take this on, and it's going to be a beautiful moment. We talk about a good death. That's a term that I heard a lot of, and what that can look like. And actually, I do think Greg had mostly a good death, compared to other things that I've heard from other people. But I had this idea of what I thought things were going to be like, what I was going to get out of it, what I could share with him, and that wasn't the case. And I'm not critiquing that situation, so as in saying I was asking too much of Greg wasn't giving enough to me. It's more like, this is not how this was advertised.
Yeah. It never is. Life never is. But
No, and it's and what a disservice.
yeah.
What a disservice to all of us.
And then you're kind of holding on to, again, similar to birth. You're thinking, oh, because we didn't do that bit right, that becomes something that, well, I can only imagine that you fixate on. When I've experienced death myself, and it's like, that isn't really what it's about, those final weeks, and the fact that you didn't get to say anything because your relationship is based on your experience of having been together for the time that you've been together. But yeah, the brain loves to, like, get focused on something that to try and wrangle, because that's a bit more tangible, and yeah, you are doing yourself a disservice if you get fixated on that.
Yeah, and I am part of this society and culture, so I most certainly am. Even on paper, I absolutely know that. I've got 15 years with Greg to kind of to draw from, but absolutely currently in this very early stages of grief, I most certainly keep going back to moments where I'm thinking, I really wish you could have said that to me. I wish that I would have got comfort from that, or I wish that I could have explained that a bit further to you. And the hard thing about death is that it's done.
Yeah.
It's done. The conversations are done. There is no more,
Mm,
and the only discussion that's going to carry on is the one that I have with myself
I was going to say,
about saying, okay, I don't get to carry that conversation on with you, but I'm going to have to come to some kind of peace with this because I can't carry this on forever and make this a thing. But yeah, like you said, I've got many years with Greg in our relationship to draw from, but
yeah, it's hard.
it's a process. It's a process.
Yeah, it is. And the weird thing is, in that final bit of death, you're kind of navigating two things. You're navigating quite a medical situation where, uh, when my granny was dying, when they were talking about pain relief, there's a if you know what you're hearing, there's a bit where that transitions from like very, very end of life, stopping them being in pain, but your brain is still like, oh, this is pain relief. You're kind of fixing something, or the fact that your instinct is to get them to eat and drink because that's what we're always told is the bit that keeps people, that's our instinct to look after people. But suddenly that kind of transitions out as well, and you can't actually, when you stand back, you can see when those moments happen, but when you're in it, it's a blur, isn't it?
There is very much a tipping point. So Greg went into end of life care. He was in a hospice for 2 weeks and then made the decision that he wanted to be at home. We kind of made the decision that that home for him was going to be his parents' house because his mum is just she's not a nurse, but she most certainly could be. She is the most natural carer I've ever seen.
Oh.
And it was the beginning of the summer holidays. I had 2 small children at home. There was no way that I could look after Greg and have the girls watch it. And we are all so happy with that situation. And it was a weird transition because you were then thinking, okay, you've come home to die, but but you were still, talking about medicine. What medicines is he going to have? And there's like a toolbox of medicines in the living room of he needs to have this, and it's a full-time job. And then the tipping point comes where you realize, and I don't quite understand where that was for me. I think we all experienced it differently, which was you want him to live longer, but then it tips into you want him to die.
Yeah.
And I don't, and maybe to other people who haven't experienced that world might not understand that might sound quite severe. But it is true, because what you are witnessing, if someone is kind of well enough, well, I say well in the loosest of terms, but if someone is if you're having conversations with them and they're not in too much pain, you can absolutely think, I want this to carry on. Why can't this just carry on? Why can't we just carry on like this? And then there is a point where you're like, no, I want this to end.
You're willing them to die.
Yeah, absolutely. For them, for you,
for everyone,
for everybody, because it becomes it's too much.
Well, I also think, again, in the times that I've experienced death in close quarters, I think there's a huge act of bravery on the dying to let themselves go. I really believe they have to give themselves over to that. And as a control freak, I understand how that must be the most unbelievable leap of faith into the next next nothingness. I remember, when my granny died, feeling immensely proud that she'd finally relinquished control. And that is it's such a weird thing, that willing them to die section, and it sounds horrendous. But
And I did have a moment where I wondered if it would come, because, you know, again, stories you hear, TV and film, I wondered if the time would come where I would say to him, you don't have to stay.
yeah,
And it did.
mm-hmm.
I did end up saying that to him. But it was when he was pretty out of it by that point, and I whispered it to him, of like, just saying,
it's okay,
we are going to be okay.
Yeah,
You know, obviously personally I was kind of, other part of my brain was thinking, fuck,
don't you dare go, don't leave me.
Oh my god, are we going to be okay? But in that moment, to say, you don't have to stay for this, like, you are okay to go,
you've done it.
And there was a relief, actually, being able to say that to him.
Yeah,
again, it sounds bizarre, it really does, to be able to say to the person you love the most, die, let yourself die. Oh, what a weird one. Weird.
Yeah, but also a huge act of bravery on your part, because I mean, is there a more crystal clear articulation of love than to say, this is the single worst thing that's about to happen to me, but I want you to move, you know. I don't accept it, but I'm kind of, I find the language to describe it, but it's a very specific thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I wasn't actually there when he died, and it's interesting to read out what I wrote.
You knew that was going to happen.
Well, I thought, because of how he most certainly didn't want a lot of people to be around him. We were all talking privately, saying, this is going to happen when we're out of the room. This is not how we thought it was going to happen. And the nurses were saying, oh, it's so common. It's so common that people will do that. They will make a decision. The person dying will make a decision to do it not in front of other people. And that's what we thought was going to happen. I was really gung-ho about the fact that I was going to be there for forever. I was, for years, the whole of the time that Greg was ill, I was thinking, I'll be the one, I'll be lying next to him, I'll be holding his hand. I don't know if other people are going to be able to cope with it, but I will definitely be there. And as the time was coming, I realised that I absolutely couldn't handle it. And I was terrified of being there. So I spent the night before he died, I spent the night alone with him. There was a lot of people in the house.
Yes.
Everybody had we were told it was ours. So the whole team, extended family turned up, and everyone was, the kettle was on, the candles were on, the blankets were out, and we set up a vigil, which was wonderful, actually, for everyone to be together. And weirdly, I laughed more on that night than I have for years. My sister, one of my strongest memories of that night is being with my sister-in-law in Greg's parents' kitchens, wetting, literally having to cross my legs because I was laughing so hard at these stories that she was telling me. I was hysterical. And then I slept next to him alone.
Well done.
That night. Well, I did. Well, I say sleep. I didn't sleep.
You were next to him
in the slightest. And I stayed with him. And then I got to 6 o'clock in the morning. And I just thought, that's it.
I'm done.
That's it. I'm done. And I can't explain it more than that. And I opened the window for him. And I just whispered to him, you can go now. You can go. And I've left the window open for you, and you can go. And I just gave him a kiss and just said, I'll see you later. And just drove home drove to my parents' house where my children were at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was it's so funny. You have these poignant moments. And I remember having some poignant music playing on the drive through the dark. And it was like a film. And I was really in that film moment. And then And then it's weird how like real life kicks in. No one would answer the door. So I was then having to like try and phone my mum. Nobody would answer their bloody phones. Then I'm having to like go, Mum, like outside at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was like, it just popped the balloon of poignancy.
Well, that's life, isn't it?
This is real life. And so I wasn't there. Greg's brother and his cousin were actually with him. And they told me that they were just telling these stories about their childhood to each other, and they were showing each other really funny videos on YouTube, and they were wetting themselves laughing. So the last thing that Greg heard was stories, like really funny, stupid stories
Stupid boy stories.
Stupid boy stories from when he was a kid, and them laughing at like really vulgar videos on YouTube. And it is perfect.
Yeah.
That is perfect. I couldn't have wanted anything more than that for him.
But you had the part with him that was right for you. Like, you wouldn't want, for you to have been in that situation wouldn't have been quite right either. It does work out, and you knew in yourself that it had tracked in the way that felt right in that moment. There was nothing more that you can do than go with your inner feeling.
Yeah, and I've really all of my intentions through everything I ever did, actually, through the whole 5 years, my criteria was, will I regret this later?
Yeah.
And that was my decision-making process always. And in terms of that stuff about the actual Greg's death, I'm really happy with what I chose to do and what we all chose to do.
There you go. I mean, it's huge. It's huge.
But it was not what we thought. We none of it worked out how we thought it was going to at all.
But how can it? That's what it is to be human, isn't it? And that's actually what I was going to ask you about. I was going to talk to you about grief. We've just really gone big on actual death. But do you think that the anticipatory grief that you, of course, felt because of the diagnosis, do you think that prepared you? Do you think it served a purpose? Do you think it's just one of those things you have to live with? And this is 30 questions in one. How do you, when you've lived with grief in you for so long, does it become part of you? I think is the question I want to ask.
Hang on, let me ask the first.
So what did I ask then?
Hang on, the first bit, anticipatory grief. Do I think that it helped grief now?
Yeah. Or prepared you in any way?
Yeah. I started grieving for Greg literally the moment that Greg was diagnosed with incurable cancer. It began then, and I remember on the drive home from hospital after we were told he had to stay in hospital, I was on my own, and I wrote his eulogy in my head.
Did you?
On that night, and do you know what? It's pretty much exactly the eulogy I did write 5 years later. Everything I wanted to say was pretty much exactly the same, and I wrote it in my head that night, and that's when the grief started. Absolutely. And I do think it helped me. There was no denial, but when you're in those meetings and you're doing all the research about treatments, there's just the statistics of everything. There's no denial in that. So I think that the process began. And I think for me, I don't think this is the case for everybody. I don't think it's a universal truth. But I think for me, I had done so much work. I had thrown myself into therapy to process stuff. I think that it most certainly did soften the blow. But I think I almost tried to. I think I did definitely try to outrun it. Well, I thought, right, I'm going to get a lot of this. Again, this is the student in me. This is this is me thinking, if I can just do enough work now, it won't hit me so hard later. So again, I did all the research. I read all the books. I was listening to Griefcast from the very beginning. And I had my secret library. in my house where I was reading books about grief hidden inside other books so that Greg didn't see. Because Greg had a very different thought process to me. He was very much about, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going there. I'm just going to live. Whereas I was aware that I'm the one who's going to be left. I'm the one who's going to have to deal with the children. So I need to be prepared.
For the other side.
Little bit like the little Girl Scout. No, little bit like the Girl Guides of like being prepared. And I wasn't prepared for the death. And I don't think I do think it's lessened the blow, but the grief is different now because I can't feel like, oh my God, Greg's going to die. Oh, but I'll just nip upstairs and I'll make him a cup of tea and we can go and have a chat about what a shit show Brexit is. Do you know what I mean? Like there is no antidote to the grief now.
Yeah.
We can't just sit and watch The Office. So I can just be like, you're here. I can feel you. I know it's coming, but at this moment, you are here. So the grief is different because there is an emptiness now, this real, and it's quite physical for me. Again, I think it probably manifests different in different people, but for me, it's quite guttural. There's this emptiness in my gut where there's nothing to fill it. And I think before our lives were so full of the normal day-to-day, like having to do the food shopping, having to deal with the kids, the school run, all that kind of stuff. And also like oncology appointments. Our life was very, very full. And I think, the void is very different now. So it's just changed.
And again, this could be me projecting, but you've been working towards something. You always knew that the death was the end point, and then that's happened, and you're quite literally over the other side of that, and that is that whole feeling of something on the horizon, even if it's a negative thing, it is something to point towards, isn't it? That sounds bizarre, but
it's absolutely not. It's not bizarre because actually, it again, to go back to birth, it reminds me of everything about the pregnancy when you're doing like the apps that tell you how big the baby is and you're gearing up to labor, and you feel like labor and birth is the finish line. And I can remember being alone when I had Darlie, my first daughter, that moment where the visiting hours are over, everyone's gone, and you're alone with this baby. And I was like, I've basically just done the same as running a couple of marathons. I am so exhausted. I'm in pain. And now I've got to look after a baby. And again, it was one of those moments of going, no one talks about this. No one suddenly like, now the real work starts.
And in both instances, they're the two most forever things. The thing is, after the first 6 months of parenting, you're like, all right, this is my forever now.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the same with the death and the grief.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're not coming back.
No.
Oh, this is it forever. Oh, yeah. I've got this child now wants my attention forever.
Yeah.
Basically, this person is now looking to me constantly. And I remember that feeling it's that like the overwhelm and the shock of like, I thought the birth was the end point. That's what we were heading towards. And I feel like that with Greg's death, that it was all gearing up to this end point. And now that we've tipped over into this next phase, I'm like, oh fuck, things are still hard. Oh, and also I've still got to go to Sainsbury's. Oh, I've still got to do the reading with the kids. Like all this other stuff still ticks on. But there's this enormous other thing that I've got to carry at the same time.
And then again, this might be too early in the process for you, but again, like motherhood, to begin with, you wear the badge of motherhood. You're like, and I've got these babies. And then you get to this weird bit. You're like, oh no, I want to find a way to be Clemmie who has children. Now, you have been so defined for a long time by a woman whose husband is dying and now died with cancer, which of course will continue to be part of you. But you've got to now figure out how to be Stacey and be you.
That's definitely has been one of my considerations through all of this, especially because Greg was in the band Delays. He was a really well-known artist as well. He had books of his poetry published. He's just this like disgustingly talented all-rounder that was well known.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I was kind of in many circles Greg's wife. And then that began to shift and became to be known in my own right. But again, it was because I was talking about grief and obviously talking about Greg. And yeah, I don't know how that's going to pan out because currently, yeah, like, you know, as I'm sure you did when you started your blog about being a mum, that you want to talk about like the details of like, I want to talk about all the details of having babies. And then you get to, again, it's that tipping point, isn't it? Where you're like,
oh no.
When you're around like other parents, and I don't know what age your child has to be to feel that, but you're like, I don't want to talk about sleep patterns.
No, because I've just got to live with this.
Yeah,
kids don't sleep, so we've got to just carry on.
Yeah, that's the end. I don't want to talk about what they're eating.
Because they don't eat.
They don't eat. They'll eat when they want. I don't know what age that happens. I don't know what age any of this happens, but I don't want to deal with it. I think for me at the moment, it's really helpful for me. But I definitely think I know that I don't want to be defined by Greg's death. I mean, obviously, it is such a pivotal moment in my life, in my children's lives, and our family's lives. But in terms of it being such a kind of heavy negative thing, I can't take any of that stuff away. But I suppose what I can do is try to take all of that and turn it into something else. I mean, I definitely, a part of me definitely died when Greg died. And I mean that in a way where I remember being sat next to him, probably the day before he died. And it was the bizarrest feeling. I could feel my physicality changing. It was almost like I was, you know, like in Teen Wolf.
It's happening.
Or like Michael Jackson in Thriller, where like he's kind of like turning into a different thing. I could feel physically myself changing watching him die. And again, like birth, like, you know, when like the muscles in your body are moving in a way like you are some kind of alien. Like, what the fuck is going on with my body? It felt like that. I was changed forever. So, you know, the me who used to be a fashion lecturer, who was just a bit more more easygoing, I suppose, a bit naive to things, maybe less empathetic towards people. I mean, that side, that part of me, I can't go back. There's no going back to that. There's going forward, and I can take a lot of this stuff that's happened with Greg and turn it into something different. I don't want to say you can make lemonade out of lemons.
No, bullshit.
But there is, you know, all those cliche sayings. There is always an inkling of truth in those, which is like, well, this is the hand I've been dealt. What else am I going to do? I've got to work with what I've got. Yeah.
Actually, a couple of things there in that mother of all list where you said, I feel like a child and an old woman both at once. I think that's such a profound thing. But actually, I think it's because in those moments you're most stripped back to the purest version of you. And I think when these big life shifts happen, it's very disconcerting because you can no longer pretend to be something. You know, the person you are in death, the person you are in labour, the person you are in these raw moments is the pure you, aside from your qualifications and your outfits and your, you know, whatever else. And it's weird. I think it just happens with age as well, where you're like, oh, all these years I've managed to kind of front things. I get less and less able to be anything but the most authentic version of me, which is terrifying in some ways, but also liberating, isn't it?
Yeah. Glennon Doyle talks about a concept of every different version of you, every age that you have been living inside you. And I resonate with that so deeply. I definitely have had moments, in the most harrowing of moments during the past 5 years, of having these really young versions of me bubbling up to the surface and thinking, the real romantic Piscean child who was like, your husband's going to die. Like, how the fuck has this, how are we here? How are you 41 about to be a widow? How the fuck did this happen?
Yeah, this is tragic. This is what it's going.
This wasn't what was going to happen.
No.
This wasn't what was going to happen when you were 8. I was talking to one of my friends last night about being like a preteen, looking at my posters of Corey Haim on my bedroom wall and like crying in that way where you're like, I love him so much and I just want him to be my boyfriend. And these idealistic views you have of that are infiltrated into your brain of, this is what love is going to look like. This is what a marriage is going to look like. This is who you will be up until you die when you're at the ripe old age of 95. And yeah, I've just having these different versions of me cropping up going, what? This is not what we thought was going to happen. That makes me sound like I've got multiple personalities in my head. But I really resonated with that idea that she offers up, that we just have and I draw a lot of strength from those. Like you said, like the older I get as well, I definitely live a lot more authentically, but you realize there's a hell of a lot more to be scared by. Life is just way more tricky. There's a hell of a lot more things that can hurt you. And sometimes I do need that, like that 18-year-old me's defiance and confidence to just be like, oh, fuck it. Just keep going. It'll be all right.
Yeah. Because actually, off mic with producer Steve, we were just talking about like when will this chaos end? Like, when will we not have stuff all over the table? When will the cupboards be sorted? And then you sit between this thing of, no, I need to sort this out, or versus the level of acceptance. I think, again, I'm just about to turn 40 as well, you're kind of waiting for all the easy fun bit to come back. And it's not going, but I'm not going to be 25 again. It's a real shock.
Well, I've, especially going through cancer and death, with someone that I live with who is, Greg was a couple of years older than me. But I've started to do some maths in my head of like, okay, so I've got small children who are 6 and 8. My parents are, how old are my parents? Oh God, I don't want to say the wrong age in case they listen to this. They are early 70s, let's say that. And I'm now kind of going, okay, so my children are going to need all of this energy and time from me. Then my parents might get ill, so I'm going to have to look after them. How many years have I got of, like you said, that freedom where I think I'm going to then kick into like, oh, the freedom, the ease, being able to really enjoy this part of my life. And I learned from Greg that who knows when the next phone call's coming.
No, so you got
it. Who knows when the next routine appointment turns into something else with yourself, with your God forbid, with your kids, with someone you love, and then things change again. So I definitely, I talked about in that list about becoming more reckless. I haven't been very reckless yet, but the feeling
feel it there.
Yeah, but that feeling of like, oh my God, I've got to live because what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? Something's going to happen. Like I haven't used up my quota of pain with my husband dying. No. Which I'm so fucking annoyed about.
It's not how it works. It's not how it works. Like, I've done the really big bit of bad stuff, so now the rest is going to be fine, right?
Yes.
It's unfortunately like, oh no, life is unbelievably unjust.
Yes. So so now I'm like, okay, right, I'm currently in this time when, right, okay, yes, we've got big, deep grief going on, but let's live.
Mm.
And I think that is an antidote to
To death.
death. I think when you've seen death close up in that way, I think it's why a lot of people get pregnant after they've been near a death. That's not going to be me, but
Yeah,
but
'cause
I
you think,
think me and Greg got pregnant with Dali pretty much immediately after Greg's granddad and one of my best friends died within like a week of each other. Just to be so shocked by death, we were like, right,
fuck,
what are we waiting for?
let's do
What
it.
what on earth are we waiting for?
Mm.
Let's get pregnant. Let's just do it now.
Yeah, and that is the gift. There's definitely a very, for me, there's in the immediate part after death, you have this very out of body thing where you can, as I said before, see life for what it is. And you're like, why on earth have I been bothering with that thing? Why am I stressed about that? That's actually, I don't like that at all. That's out. And then and if you can, that clarity is a gift, but it's yeah, it's fleeting, I think, because you get caught up in the Sainsbury's shop
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
It's fleeting, but if we can try and hold on to it, that is the lemonade out of the lemon, isn't it?
I've definitely felt that, and it's weird. After 4 months, I can feel it slipping.
Mm,
I think you feel quite superhuman
mm.
actually after a death. I think it builds this protective bubble around you, which might be shock, maybe, where you are just kind of like, I don't give a fuck.
Well, you've had it. You've had the bad
Yeah,
thing.
I
It doesn't get
now,
worse.
nothing can hurt me. Literally, nothing can hurt me. Nothing that anybody does or says can hurt me. I feel like, like you said, you've had this veil lifted and you see exactly what's important in life. You see the nonsense and you think, I know the answers of the universe.
Yeah.
And then you don't sleep because your child is up saying like, I want to get up, I want to play Roblox, it's
Mm.
4:30 in the morning, but I want to play Roblox. And you don't sleep, and then you've haven't got the right things for the lunchbox, and
Mm.
and then life just trundles on, and
Mm.
you can forget.
That's the tricky thing about life. It's like the absolute magic of it being in existence versus the mundane trundling through it and accepting that a lot of life isn't extraordinary. In
Yeah.
fact, it's very everyday, and it's trying to, it's just a horrible cliche, but trying to remember that the mundane bits are the magic somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's really true. When I think about Greg, I got to do a huge amount of incredible things with Greg. When Delays played at festivals, I got to be side of stage. I've got
Yeah.
to go to meet loads of different people in bands. I've got to go to incredible studios. I've got to go to recording studios abroad. None of that feature in my top 10 or even
Moments.
top 20 moments with Greg. In
There you go.
fact, if I could do anything with Greg now, if I could have him for an hour, I would we would sit in bed with a cup of tea with his favourite biscuits, rich tea biscuits.
Oh, bad choice,
Uh,
Greg.
yeah, shit biscuits. Um, and we would this is what we did every night after the kids were in bed. We would sit in bed and we would listen to James O'Brien on LBC talk about politics, and we would rant about politics, and not the most relaxing way to go to bed, but it was what we loved to do. And then I would drift off and he'd carry on reading, and that would be the thing I'd do.
Mm.
If I had one more hour with Greg, it would be that.
So every day
Yeah.
but so precious.
Yeah.
There you go. I think that's the ideal place to end. I can't believe that I'm so honoured that you've talked through these moments, Stacey, because it's the hardest stuff to talk about. But there's so much to learn from sitting in this unbelievably uncomfortable place that no one wants to acknowledge. But it's
There's
beautiful and amazing and terrifying, isn't it?
I found out that in some cultures, the widow is revered as a spiritual teacher because
Wow.
they are seen as someone who has come as close as possible to the precipice of death
Hmm.
and walked back, and that they have a gift for that people come to, and they kind of are used as a spiritual figure that might do healing or offer advice to people within the community, because they feel that they have been near something that most people haven't.
Mm.
And I agree with that.
Hmm.
I definitely, I feel like that I feel that I was watching something that other people weren't
Hmm.
watching, and learning lessons that other people haven't, or many people have, obviously, but and I feel a real instinct to portray that back to people,
Hmm.
almost like I've kind of gone on this journey, this voyage, and I've come back to tell the tales of what's on the other side.
Mm. And that's called wisdom. And what else can we want from things than other than to have the opportunity to gain wisdom? And
Yeah.
you've got it. And and what we have to do with that is try and share it, which is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, pleasure. Such a pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah, put two Pisces on the most emotional subject going, and I was like, I'm
Yeah.
crying, but I'm not
Yeah.
going to talk about
See?
it.
Yeah. So let's see what happens.
um,
I am going to do my other list for you, by the way.
yeah, please do.
I have started it. Yes, and we'll finish it.
I wonder whether your worlds will come back. You know, the line again in that list where you talk about your outfit for the funeral. Did you get a good outfit?
Fucking brilliant outfit.
Well, great. What did you wear?
It was so dramatic. I
Was it? Did
I
you wear a
bought
veil?
Yes. Yes, I
Oh,
did.
right.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I wore black lace that I've got to find a picture. I don't know if I got a proper picture of it. Big puff sleeve black lace to the floor. I wore,
Gown.
yeah, a gown. I bought the most expensive pair of sunglasses I've ever bought, that are like, they're basically the size of my face. Um, Big black sunglasses, and I wore like a fascinator that had a big lace veil across it. Oh, and I wore black lace gloves.
Did you take them off in the church or in the
I
wherever you did
I
the
When I did the eulogy, like
a
that. But
meme?
but do you know what? I just thought, because I like my mum, like I ordered thousands of pounds worth of dresses to be, and I was like, I just need to try them on, because obviously, like,
Yeah,
we all had
the
COVID.
process.
We all had COVID just before Greg's
Ah, of
funeral, so I
course.
couldn't leave the house. So I had to have all of this stuff bought in. And my mum was like, look, is this a good idea? Is this a fashion show? And I said,
Ah,
yes, yes,
yes, it
it
is.
fucking is. I was like, listen, I've got to go. You've not been to your husband's funeral. You don't get to say, because I'm going to go, and I'm just gonna look as
Fabulous.
brilliant as I fucking can do. And that's it. And like, there was some, like, I must admit, there was one with a train.
So basically, just a wedding dress, but black.
Yeah. And my mum was like, you
Enough.
please. And even I had to say, okay,
Mm.
I can't have a train. Um, but yeah,
Hats off to you.
but I did it. Yeah. And it was interesting what you said about, where do you think, not being wanting to be defined about grief? That's definitely a big consideration for me, because like, I don't know what I'm going to feel. Maybe I will feel fine for it. And I don't want to talk about my own grief forever, because that's boring, and boring for everyone else as well.
Not boring.
I very much want to build a community, and listen, and be a space for other people to have
Mhm.
their stories and their voices. But also about, the exhibition that I curated was about post-traumatic growth, which was about, how do you thrive? Like, how do you learn? How do you go through trauma? So not just death, but like
Mhm.
trauma, and then how do you thrive from that? How do you morph it into
Mm.
something which becomes quite an incredible thing for your life?
And actually, that can start with wearing a really, really great outfit. I love that. I love that because that's connecting to yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that is something that I want to think about. So, because for me, as well, Greg being ill, the pandemic, everyone's just wearing still,
Elastic.
elastic. I've got a wardrobe full of clothes that I don't wear
Yeah.
because when I was a fashion lecturer, every single day was a fashion show. That's a fact. And it was
Yeah.
brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. Um, and I definitely feel like when I want to feel better, and I want to enjoy clothes, I want
Yeah.
to, um, as I think is important for many people. So yeah, I definitely think that fashion can come into it. That's
Yeah.
that was my old life. Maybe I can fashion and grief bringing them
What?
together in a crazy cocktail somehow.
You laugh, but I feel like that is what
It's got legs.
that it's got legs. It's you're like until you see it when you go, oh right, yeah, that is what it looks like. Well, I mean, I would really like to see your outfit. Really, if you do have any photos. I mean, you don't really take photos at funerals. Again, quite one of those weird things where naturally it's quite an
Do you
amazing
know what?
day.
Bloody devastated that there weren't photos.
Yeah, I don't know why because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
just don't. You feel like
No,
you're being naughty, but there is a day that you want to try and remember, isn't
yeah.
it?
There was a video of again, this is a very modern thing where there was a video uh of the funeral, of the actual funeral, so then you can like telecast it out to all the people that can't be there.
Oh, right.
That's a COVID thing.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
started in COVID,
Okay.
but they're carrying it on for like people who might be in other countries
Yeah, I get
just
that.
or just can't get to the funeral. My mum, because you don't get it, it's just like a password you give out to people. My mum's a bit of a tech wizard, so she videoed the screen, so we've actually got the video of it.
Wow.
And what's ridiculous, again, I don't remember this, but the song that we played as we went into the crematorium was Raspberry Beret by Prince. I dance down the aisle.
But that's what you're feeling.
But I was holding my like Dali and Bay's hands, and I think it was just that moment of like Greg is being carried in his coffin in
Yeah.
front of us by
Giving me exit.
like his family, his best friends, my brother. I'm dressed as some kind of like mobster mole. We're at my children's father's funeral. And it was just that moment. It's like pumping in the speakers. The reason we chose it is because the song was Delay's walk on song. So they always walked on stage to Raspberry Beret. So it was quite fitting.
Yeah.
And the music took me, but I don't remember doing it. It's only when we watched the video was like, fucking hell. I was dancing at my husband's funeral.
But
Don't,
what? But I mean, this is a whole different chat. And actually, I have done a podcast with Anna and well, with the life, death, whatever girls.
Louise.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Louise. Like funerals can be. There is no way of doing them. You've got to make them feel the way that they should feel, not just for the person, but in celebration of the person who died, but for the people who are grieving. And life and death and joy and sadness and all sit so close to each other.
Yeah. We had in the funeral we had a lot of in jokes that happened. And we even got the celebrant, who was like a proper vicar, I think he is, but not like anybody I've ever met before. He's got the filthiest mouth you could imagine. And we even convinced him he came wearing like the full on garb, like the dog's collar, the full black robes to the floor. We convinced him to wear a Delays t-shirt underneath. And then he did like the big, like an ABBA reveal at the front. He pulled it off and was wearing jeans and a Delays t-shirt. It was incredible. But all I could think was, I wish Greg was here to see this
He'd love
because he
this.
would fucking love this.
But that's how it should feel, I think.
Yeah, yeah. It was good to design something that really was a proper celebration of who, and it was very Greg. Everything about it was so Greg, which was good.
Yeah. And I'm sure he would have loved your outfit. Or
Oh,
would he not? Would he
no,
not?
no.
He would have hated it.
I know exactly what he would have said.
What?
You know when you just know someone, you just know their words. I'd have walked in and he'd have gone, "Oh, here she is. Can't bear that it's about someone else. You've got to be the
Upstaging him.
upstaging. It's all about me." I knew that he would joke. He would really take the piss out of me. But he would have thought it was very funny.
Classic. Yeah. Wouldn't let his funeral be just about him.
No, God no.
See, that's hilarious. Well, I'm conscious of time and I need to wrap it up, but
Yes.
thank you so much for
Pleasure.
making me laugh and cry today. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, Clemmie.